my childhood, a classic life, let's say finally classic, and at the same time a bit atypical, with my mother and my grandmother. So 3 generations in the same apartment. When I was born, my mother was in depression. My maternal grandmother, my granny, took over directly after my birth. She taught me everything, especially how to love and all that. The fundamentals of life. My mother, was not well, took pills, all that. Growing up, around age 3.5 to 4, I often saw her sleeping in the living room, likely due to the effects of her medication. She also endured a lot of suffering from her past. Nevertheless, my grandmother continued to take care of me. When I was little, I went to her a lot. I got rejected. Afterwards, it was different. It escalates actually with my age. Let's say the violence escalates. There's an anxiety-inducing atmosphere at home and actually a lot of insults. And that's something I'm going to take very badly because I don't understand. And likewise, I still can't find what triggers it. So I'm not the perfect child. I don't do anything foolish. If there's no problem at school, it doesn't make sense. And there are insults, which are insults you can hear in arguments. I don't know, maybe in a couple, but really where there is predominant hatred there. It's something that's going to affect me. Start to kill me a little from the inside. I go to school. One day I was in 2nd grade at that time. I was in tears because the day before it was like that. In the morning it was like that. I wanted to talk to the teacher as I was very close to the teachers. I sought contact with adults who I believed would be reassuring to me. So I went to see my 2nd grade teacher. I tell her, my mom, she insulted me. She asked me exactly what happened, all that. I tell her. And she tells me, if it happens again, you tell me about it. The following day, I returned to discuss it with her. Afterward, the February winter holidays began. I visited my father's house. On my way back, I stopped by my mother's. I have good and bad news, my mother says. The good news, I've met someone. The bad, I received a letter. Are you going to live with strangers? My mother was summoned by a social worker or social workers, I don't know, telling her, you are an abusive mother. The problem, so to speak, is that when my mother was summoned by social services, my mother simply responds, yes, totally. I call my daughter a whore. Yes, what's the matter? Where's the problem? I need to express myself. Anyway, I'm on edge. I'm tired. So, yes, if I call her a whore, a slut, that's how it is. So there are social workers who hear this. From there, it takes on a magnitude. I think in communication, we could have perhaps avoided getting to this point. Little by little, I meet the person who will keep me, host me at her place and take care of me. So it's a family with 2 children, 2 boys. And from there, she will treat me like a child. And me, at that moment, I will tell myself, but she might think that I have a disability. I really won't understand. And in the end, I will realize that it's nice because it's nice to be treated like a child. And that's when I realized the gap between my mother and life at home. At that age, I know my mother relied a lot on me. She would wait for me to come home from school so we could go into town. We would visit the cafe together, having both wonderful and difficult times there. But she confided a lot about everything that hurt her, everything that had hurt her in her past. I felt she needed me and that she would die without me. She often mentioned suicide. During my first placement, having access to the landline phone was a frequently occurring situation. One evening, my mother told me, because of what you've done, I'm going to kill myself and you won't have a mother anymore. This fear, it never left me. It left me recently. I realized afterwards that things were going rather well for her. In fact, it was more for me that things were not going well. In this family, nothing was asked of me. I just had to sit at the table to have food to eat. At home, it wasn't like that at all. It was my grandmother who cooked when she could at the beginning of her life. When I was born, she was already 70 and continued until she couldn't get up anymore. I never knew a life without problems. So I didn't accept this kind of tranquility and this kind of child's life because I was too used to the adult world. But I reacted quite well, meaning I wasn't going to be vindictive or really hellish. On the other hand, I planned to be very closed off, not wanting to betray my mother by getting too close to them. So I had to accept certain things because I was forced to, and at the same time, I was forbidding myself from other things. I've always had a taste, for example, from my mother for school, all that. There, this family who had a bit more means gave me a taste, brand things, things like that. So I had in a little plastic, all well done, so it was a bit on the fly at home. That's how we lived. And there you go, I wasn't unhappy. I mean, materially, all that, I lacked nothing. And I was telling myself, if I consume this snack, I betray my mother. So during the break, I was distributing. And from there, I remember a day when I was alone in the yard. I told myself, there, it's over. There is something that... in fact, I had moved into another world. It was over for me, the child's life. There was an innocence that was leaving. And there was, I don't know, a part of loneliness that really entered me and that didn't let go of me for the hit. At that moment, I actually realized that the adult world, it could be a dangerous world. And actually, I realized that I was actually the puppet of all these adults who were dysfunctional. I'm talking about my mother, the other part, my father, all of that. I was not happy. I thought a lot about leaving the foster family. Through the window, they lived in a house. There was the highway to cross. I thought about leaving. But I told myself if I do it, in fact, the foster family had given me a calendar and I was checking off the days, and I told myself if I did that, I would be relocated further from my mother in school. Staying enrolled in the same school was the most important thing for me. And at the same time, a huge part of me had completely lost trust and faith in adults. So from there, I understood that I was myself an adult. The moment I returned, there was a lull until a specific day. I remember my mother saying, anyway, she hasn't changed, always the same. I didn't understand once again, but maybe I actually said something. That was the beginning of a new era at my mother's, much stronger than the previous one. In fact, my mother had a phrase that she repeated a lot. It was at 18 years old. Anyway, the contract ends. I heard this phrase all my life because it was her duty to care for me, although she knew she had other options. If she had wanted me to be placed again, all it took was a phone call and it was done. And I don't understand if it was so terrible for her to have me there in the middle. But from there, I would say about my 12 years up to my 15, 16 years, it was the hard period. It was really the hard period. I kept everything inside me and I had big anxiety attacks. Things, but really it was terror. Even though nothing was happening at the moment, it was never at the moment. It happened when I least expected it, either afterwards or at another time. And a lot of obsessions too, a lot of obsessions more absurd than the others. I believed that if I touched this object 10 times, it would resolve everything with my mother, prevent her suicide, and make everything all right. The issue escalated to a point where it was noticeable at school. And at the same time, there was violence, which took another form. In fact, life with my mother had always been by cycle, by phase. It was for about a week, 10 days. Big Max, she always told me she loved me, that I was her flesh and blood, and that she couldn't live without me, things like that. And from that point on, we were inseparable, bonded as one. And there, she confided a lot in me. Well, like always, I was her best friend. For me, however, she was my mom. And there was always a moment where it would mess up, actually. When I confronted her quite recently about the why and the how, she burst into tears, telling me to stop torturing her with this, as I would never get an answer anyway. And in fact, at that moment, that phase was unraveling. It was quite ritualized. In fact, I had to go sit on a chair that was next to the bed where she was sleeping. I was waiting for her to speak. She started to speak. Sometimes it took a lot of time. A lot of blame on the fact that I was guilty of absolutely everything in her life. And the conclusion was, since you're guilty of everything in my life and you say you love me that much, the only way to fix what you've done is to erase yourself. When she first told me that, I thought I had misheard. And actually afterwards it became usual to hear that. The little seed having been planted in my mind, I ended up believing it. She wanted me to have a reaction, and not having a reaction, I felt the moment coming when it was going to go wrong. As she clenched her teeth, her jawbone protruding, I realized we were escalating to the next level. Since she had long nails, when she grabbed my face, I had the mark of her nails. Actually, I was bleeding, right? So there was one night where she felt so guilty that she cried a lot. She had self-harmed very slightly, but she had done it because that's what I was doing. Actually, in response to all these harsh words I was receiving, actually that's what I was doing. I would go to my room, I had none. I was filled with anger, rage, a lot of things. Actually that I couldn't express in the face of all this, in front of her, And so my way of expressing that was by self-harming, by hurting myself. We had prepared an excuse to give at school if I was questioned, to avoid a new report. So I reassured her by telling her that it wasn't serious anyway, that I wasn't in pain. I was afraid that she would hurt herself, actually. My condition deteriorated. I took my mom's pills after a friend who had tried them before. That day I took the wrong pills. I took them in math class just after I had orienteering in sports. After that it's quite blurry. I know there was a car that came to pick me up that took me to the infirmary, the firefighters who arrived. I began to understand a bit when I reached the hospital. My mother didn't answer, taking the whole afternoon. In fact, she ended up responding to my friend who was there with me. Well, she was very angry. She came because she had to, since I was a minor. So my mother arrived. We were both taken into an office, and it was the hospital nurse who asked my mother, who then said, "What's going on at home? Are there things going wrong?" All that. And then my mother, who lets everything out about the insults, about everything that's happening. The nurse takes him back by saying, "Do you know what a whore is?" "Well, you know you can't say things like that." My mother says she knows what it is, but that's how I am. When I say things, it's like that. I need to express my anger. I stayed in the hospital for about a week, but in the end they didn't find anything and needed the room. So, of course, I left. I went back to my mother's at that time. So that was the beginning of the addiction, really, the very early signs. At first it was occasional. When I got my baccalaureate and when I started my studies, the prep, it really became daily and I didn't really realize the danger. It was quite complex with many paradoxes at the same time. It didn't necessarily end, but in any case, the fact of taking frantically like that and doses that, of course, far exceeded the norm, that's over, yeah. So in 2018, I'm in a home in Aix-en-Provence where I'm studying. One evening, we were offered to go see the movie Out Loud. So it was the film that retraced the journey of the winner of the first season of Eloquencia de Paris. And at the end of this movie, we're offered to sign up. So me, actually, I was really in my yes life period. I was saying yes to everything. I wanted to try everything. I attend all appointments without fail. And there, the first time I write a text, it's a subject in the form of questions. And it's the first time in front of a jury of lawyers and journalists. And I realized that I can move people, and so for me, it's magical. I get through the first round, it's good, I have access to the second, but it's like that every time. And I can move people. Each time people are genuinely moved, it's not just an act. I tell myself it might be luck, but it's magical. I continue like this until the semifinals, where I lose. But well, it was a great experience where I realized that I can write and I can touch people through writing, so it starts like that. After that, I will always be tempted to write. Anyway, I always wanted to express myself. So, in fact, during the lockdown, I start writing texts on Facebook to keep the link with others. So I start writing on Facebook like that. These texts then, 55 texts, republished on the Eloquentia page in Marseille. So the contest that I had done. And so, in fact, it gives me visibility. And then I also see that people who don't know me can understand this humor that borders on the absurd. And so after 3 days, I tell myself it will be a book. There you go, it will be a book. Because it works well and I see it well in a book. So it will work in any case. I have no idea how I will go about it. But there you go, I send this to a publishing house. I type simple publishing house. A few weeks later, I received a response. I have a lady who calls me on the phone to tell me that she liked it a lot, that she laughed a lot, and that therefore she agrees to meditate. For me, it was already clear that I needed a means of expression to transcend all of this. In fact, it had to transform, it had to become something else. And so writing fell upon me. Clearly, I didn't really seek out writing. It fell upon me. For me, it chose me, so it was like that. It was up to me then to learn to tame this gift a bit, and not to let myself be totally possessed by it. Because I also had a little phase of toxic relationship with writing. It's a necessity for me, yes, through writing. We can heal a lot of things. We can make things exist that don't exist. There is a huge part of magic. In the letters to mom that I am writing, I am addressing the illusion of my mother, that is the idea of the mom that I have, who unfortunately does not exist today, so I address her in this way. In fact, like a young girl would like to call her mother and tell her, "Here, this happened to me, I want to share it with you." The things of life, I have no family to confide in, and then a mom, it's important when you're a girl too, to confide in. Writing is my outlet. I write when I'm angry or sometimes even against her. All the letters are very different. It's actually, I'm building a relationship that is healthy, that I might have wanted to have. We don't have the parents we want, and that's okay. I must emphasize that my mother is not condemned. There's no something of that sort. It's just that sometimes the pain, it's so strong that people close their heart to love, close their heart to everything. I also explained it in a letter, but I totally understand everything that happened. Then it's up to me to decide whether I forgive or not. So I'm not the type to be into revenge. And anyway, living in resentment towards him, it's just going to trap me and prevent me from moving forward. So no, I'm not mad at him. And then there you go. There is no condemnation either. Afterwards, yes, I do agree that there are things that are hard to accept. For example, the incitements to suicide. My mother told me that not expressing herself about it was her only regret, and it would haunt her for life. I think I'll need a lot of therapy to detach myself from it. But well, there you have it. Afterwards, there is the trial that is made to no one. You can feel it in the letters that I write. So I can read you a letter, maybe letter to Mom. I'm going to tell a little about you, to tell a lot about me. And anyway, I've spent my life protecting you, minimizing, transforming. There, everything will exist a second time. It will hurt, but it will pass. We're both used to it. Before, I would have been afraid that you would kill yourself seeing me describe you in a way that you don't like. Today, I am fearless. Your love for yourself knows no bounds. I wouldn't be surprised if you even find a certain flattery in it. Mom, why don't you realize, don't you understand that I'm just right next to you? You sent me this note, happy holiday to you and everyone around you. I wonder what image of me you could have built in your head. And maybe you're wondering the same thing about me. I would tell the camera that you never wanted to be loved. I won't tell it. For the rejected hugs, strangers would start to persist, but I dream of a hug from you. All this pain. In the end, both of us in the same vault with Grandma and the abuelos. And there you have it. We know the end. If things weren't to your liking, you would move. The women in the family don't let themselves stew in their own juice. I did what I could, even to the point of losing myself, and you seem to be the exception. You symbolize stagnation, blurring the boundary between life and death. I don't want to believe what's coming next to him, but the sight of you moving through the world without participating in it has settled deep in my throat. A bitterness that has metastasized into a cancer of life. It's your life that hurts me. It's your life that needs to be amputated from me. And when I tell her that she doesn't want to be loved, that's the impression I get. Yes, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the impression I get. My mother, I feel like she's always rejected my love, and I'm convinced she would say the same thing, that I've always rejected her love. That's how it is, actually. For me, it remains really understandable. That is something really important to me in the construction of identity. When you're little and you hear things like that, or you experience things like that, in the construction of oneself, in the vision of otherness, in the relationship with the other, it becomes complicated. And at that age, I'm already starting to take a bit of the seed. Still at 26 years old, to already take a step back, to mourn a living person, it's something that is. It's immensely difficult because it's putting away a love that is still there. There is a lot of mourning to do. There is the mourning of the image we shaped of ourselves as children. That it needs to be deconstructed because it's not true. I'm not responsible for everything. I'm not a person. I have the right to live and should not take my own life. All of these things are difficult, believe it or not. Even with all the will and strength in the world, I have a lot of will. But once, as I told you, that the little seed has been put in the mind, and especially by someone as important as a mom, when you build yourself with all that in mind, it's hard. And when there's a challenge, for example, in life, and to tell yourself I'm worth it, it's not a big deal, or recognize when someone is hurting us. There's a lot to deconstruct at the time when precisely there's everything to build, so it's not easy. But well, those are things, there are more serious things, but that doesn't take away from it. It causes suffering and remains difficult. And will remain, I think, all my life. Accepting many things, including a person's absence when we have questions, is also significant. Who would I be without those experiences and foundations? But alas, we cannot change the past. I tell myself, I'm not going to torture my mind with all this. I have to move forward. And then I take the writing with me and I tell myself that's what's going to save me. I also share my audio text on social networks. I put them in audio because I noticed that the young people, there are a lot of people who read less and less, who spend less and less time on content. I can understand, I can do the same. But in any case, like, the audio format works quite well. I put my text in audio format with also montages, archive images that fit quite well. Well, there you go. I make little montages like that at my little level to touch people, in fact, quite simply. I don't always talk about my mother. Beyond the relationship with my mother, which was what it was, I have a personality that is, I am very sensitive. So that's what probably accentuated everything I've experienced in my feelings and all that. And I also have a lot of trouble with the world. I have a lot of trouble finding my place, feeling legitimate, all that. So that's all work that I have to do on myself, but it doesn't just come from the relationship with my mother. Obviously, there is a part of me where I am like that, and a whole other part that has been shaped like that. But I must remind myself today that none of this is fixed. In fact, nothing is fixed. Tomorrow I can be different, I can be something else entirely. And we build ourselves every day. Everything is progressing smoothly without any irritations.